All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this CCSD59 Board of Education meeting for January 11th, 2021. I will now turn it over to Board President Janice Krinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Sampson. Welcome, everybody, to the District 59 Board of Education meeting tonight. We need to take roll call, please.
Krinsky.
Present.
Garlevich.
Present.
Lang.
Present.
Mancia.
Present.
Petrielli. Me. Reed.
Present.
Schumacher. Okay. And I'm done.
Okay. You know what? In the future, I'd like to get up a flag so we can say the Pledge of Allegiance, but right now we're going to skip it since there's no flag here. We did have 2 comments and suggestions from the public, which I will read now. One moment, please, while I get to the right tab here. The first one is from Karen Davidson, and I need to get open the attachment. One moment. Okay. Dear Board of Education members, I'm primarily not going to talk about hybrid learning. All I will say is please consider not extending the junior high day, even if you extend elementary. Both the schedule and lunch are much more complicated in junior high, and it's okay to be different. Most neighboring districts are. The rest of my comments will return to my pleas for improving the math curriculum in D59. This is salient as the 8th graders will begin course selection for high school on Thursday. I have recently learned that even the highest math class offered at Holmes is 1 full year behind the highest offered at the other 2 feeder junior highs for RMHS, South in D25 and Sandburg in D15. Those kids have taken geometry in 8th grade and will go on to Algebra 2 as freshmen. Our home students are completing Algebra 1 in 8th grade, the second half which started in 7th grade, and will go on to geometry as freshmen. This also means they will not get the opportunity to take calculus until their senior year, and will put them in extra AP class behind their peers, which means less college credits and more cost. I poked around to find the history of this, and it seems this was changed about 2 or 3 years ago, as the kids were not getting to 6th grade with strong enough math skills to keep the progression equivalent to the other districts. This seems right on par, as this is when the elementary math curriculum shifted away from content, as we've been discussing for 3+ years now. I know we are making strides with piloting the new curriculum, but I implore you to keep on top of this and make it a priority. It is very disappointing to realize that we had no control over this, and our choice to remain in the district will now change our son's high school trajectory. He had so much potential. In 2nd grade, he was doing multi-digit multiplication and long division when the TDP teacher was allowed to pull kids out for math enrichment. That was the only year he was truly challenged. 45 minutes of TDP twice a week with no real classroom differentiation isn't enough. Kids should be taught math at the level appropriate for them on both ends. Those needing support need to be getting earlier interventions, and those needing to be challenged should be pulled out to move faster. As we bring in the new superintendent, I want to make it abundantly clear that there is currently nobody in the administration that has worked in junior high and truly understands the needs of junior high students and teachers. I also wonder if all parents know that at Friendship Junior High, another school in District 59, students get 1.5 periods of math compared with only 1 period at Holmes and Grove. As part of the curriculum committee, we talked about these issues with Maureen Maccabee and Nicole Robinson. They were not previously aware of the high school progression issue, nor was the former director of math curriculum. We also discussed the discrepancy between Friendship and the other junior highs, and were told it's a catch-22, that it's hard to implement at the other schools, but hard to take away from a school that has already had it. That is not an acceptable answer. More articulation needs to happen between the elementary school and the junior highs, and between the junior highs and D214, and not Elk Grove High School. This is a huge flaw. We rely much too heavily on data from Elk Grove High School, where 97% of kids come from D59. We need to be looking at Rolling Meadows High School and Prospect High School to truly see that our kids are not being educated at the same level as neighboring districts. We need an administrator whose sole focus is junior high And I hope that is given serious consideration as staff is allocated next year. Thank you, signed Karen Davidson. I do want to mention that in an earlier conversation with Art, he reminded me that Nicole Robinson does in fact have junior high experience, and I believe it's specifically in math. So I think that it's of course an important area to focus on, and I just wanted to let you know that. Okay, the next one is from Lauren Zeich, and she wrote the following. Today, I am writing to express concern about middle school math and specifically about the drastic reduction in instructional time that has taken place during the pandemic. Too many middle school students are performing below grade level, and yet their math time has been slashed from 210 to 120 minutes per week. To illustrate, my 7th grader, who has always struggled with math, finally received an extra math class this year called Math Support. It allowed her to have math every day instead of every other day, and work in a small group to address specific learning gaps. I was notified today that according to iReady, she is doing too well to stay in the support class after next week. So she is losing the extra minutes in the small group support. Why is this a problem for everybody and not just my daughter? Because despite having a regular math class and an extra support class, she has made no net growth on the iReady assessment. In fact, she declined from the 35th percentile in the fall to the 29th percentile in winter. According to iReady's predicted typical growth, she will finish 7th grade without mastering 6th grade skills. Even if she meets her stretch goal, which is unlikely, she will enter 8th grade performing at a 6th grade level. When assessments indicate that a student is a full year behind grade level, but they are performing too well to qualify for additional support, it hints at a really big problem. It means that there are so many students who are 2 years behind or 3 years behind that resources cannot be spared to support students who are behind by a single year. I understand and respect that other students need the help more than my child. However, we cannot let this stand. We have spent the last year focused on the curriculum. It's time to figure out what else we can do to close gaps for all students. One obvious solution would be to ensure that all students, all middle school students, are offered math every day. Our FAST scores were abysmal before COVID. National research has shown that COVID hit math harder than other subjects. In a 2-week period, elementary students have up to 720 minutes of math instruction compared with 250 minutes for middle schoolers. Middle school has math only 5 times every 2 weeks. Is 2nd grade math so much harder than pre-algebra that it requires 3 times the amount of instructional time? That doesn't make any sense. Many things about COVID are outside of our control. The time we devote to a core subject is not. Thank you for listening. Signed, Lauren Zeich. And those two statements have been forwarded to the board so they can read it too. Okay, so that's it. So now we are up to 5.0 presentation.
Janice, I was going to make a comment a little later in the board meeting under the superintendent reports, but we are currently working on a staffing update for next year. And within that, we are including a request for additional instructional minutes at all of the middle school in the area of math. And then in addition, looking for opportunities to provide more supports at the elementary. So we'll be working on our staffing plan in the near future and presenting that to the board in February. So wanted the board to be aware of that. I think it's kind of timely considering the 2 public comments that you just read.
Mm-hmm.
That said, would like to move to the next element, which is ongoing discussion about the return to school planning. And tonight it's more of some of the updates we'd like to share with the board.
Mm-hmm.
So with included in this presentation, again, our goal remains the same, and that's to reopen all of our schools for in-person instruction as soon as possible, as soon as safely possible for students, staff, and families. Once again, I'd also like to just recognize the many people who have been part of the ongoing conversation, dialogue, and planning. I think District 59 has had an excellent balance between conversations that include our DEA and our other union groups, as well as our Board of Education. And I think we've had a very reliable partnership in talking through the challenges that the pandemic has presented to District 59. As we've indicated at previous board meetings, although hindsight is 2020, we do believe that really staying focused on the remote instruction has allowed us to provide a solution that has been consistent, has kept the same students and teachers together over the course of this time, and has allowed us to be able to have a staffing plan where our teachers and staff are present and able to support our students in a remote setting. So thank you to everyone who is continually working on this and all the partnerships that we have developed. It has been, I think, really a powerful thing that every Wednesday when our plan team meets, that there's a DEA representative. Usually it's the DEA president, Ann Wegg, who is part of those conversations and discussions that helps us prepare for these updates and our planning. So during this presentation, we're going to briefly review the current status, and then we'll go into these 4 consistent areas that we've continued to focus on over the course of this pandemic. That would be instruction, health and safety operations, and communications. Again, we're going to try to really focus on any updates for the reopening and then the remote planning that's going to be in place beginning this week. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tom, and he'll talk about current status. Tom?
Thank you, Dr. Fessler. Yes, as we've had our discussions back in December, and we talked really of shifting to our internal metrics to look at data locally and see what kind of rates of positive or probable COVID cases we've had. So over the break and as we've returned, we've worked on and revised our process to collect that type of data. So this is really a sample that working with Dr. Ossel and with Denise Webster and Dr. Degree, we've really come up with this new structure to make sure that we can basically on a day-to-day basis know what our rates are internally. So one important piece, and I should have recognized this back earlier in the fall, we truly don't have a positivity rate in the district. Positivity rate, that's in the state, that's the number of positive COVID cases compared to the number of tests given. We're not testing our staff or our students, but we're really looking at any positive cases that occur. We've included now that term probable. That was really a change from the state way back in actually November. And realistically now, if I was sick and had a positive case and my wife had the same exact symptoms, they likely would not cause her to have to go to the doctor to get a test. They'd call her a probable test or a probable case. So we really want to make sure we capture those pieces. So as we've been working on this, we're really redefining our 7-day period. And we're going to look at a Thursday to Wednesday. That captures our A and B groups every week. And Dr. Ossel came up with this great focus on Wednesdays being more of almost all of our kids remote. That gives us a chance to really look at that data and analyze it when most students aren't present. So basically I just took a sample. I grabbed Juliet Low. If you look at that bottom line where it says student and staff in-person total, over this last week, we've been collecting data from and updating data from our families in regards to how many kids will be in an A group, how many in the B group, how many might be there more than just those 2 days, could be up to 4 and 5 days. That's really for some of our specialized programs, and how many staff. So right now we're thinking there'll be about 233 kids and adults at Juliet Low over the course of any 5 days of the week when we're in school. So then we'll use that data to generate these percentages. So I use the example that January 21st to 27th, if there were 7 positive or probable cases during the course of that week, we'd hit that 3% mark. As I know we've talked about, that doesn't mean we shut down the school. That causes us to really dig deeper and investigate where are those cases at. As you can see, we'll collect by the A group, by the B group, by staff, and it will really help us track down and see if we have to make decisions like shut down a classroom. or a grade level, or take other greater actions. But this, we'll be working with our health staff, and we'll collect this data on a daily basis. We'll be able to see it as we roll through the week. Again, this is internal. This is our tracking piece. The next slide, Dr. Asa will talk about how we'll then share that information publicly.
Thank you, Tom. As Tom stated, we are working in concert with our health staff at each building to record all of our COVID-19 information every single day. Once a week, we'll gather that and add it to our dashboard so it's public knowledge. So everyone can see by building how many positive cases we have for students and for staff, how many quarantines we have due to close contact for students and staff. And now you'll see an added row which says percentage of in-person population with a positive or probable test. So we will take the data that our health staff has gathered, that we've put together to identify that percentage of the population that's positive or probable, and add that percentage point under the weekly totals. So we'll have that week by week for all of our schools and our administrative building. In addition, we made a slight change to the dashboard so that there are now 2 tabs, one for the first half of the year for September through December, and one for the second half of the year, January through May, so that when you open it, it will go right to the new January data. We plan to add the percentage of in-person population with the positive and probable test starting on January 20th. That will be the first week after we have students in the building.
Tom and Katie, this is Courtney. May I ask a question? So I'm interested in how you arrived at the 3% figure.
So originally that 3%, a number of our local districts had been using that as kind of an internal marker. You know, and it seems to be a pretty much a standard across the area. So when we first started talking about internal measures, we grabbed that number. And then as we've built these kind of internal structures, we've started to look at things like, okay, well, how many kids and staff is that? And if there are, you know, 100 people at a school and 7 have it, and that's where we hit that 3%, let's say, for that day, that really still seems to make sense as a place to dig deeper into that data. So obviously it varies by each school and the amount of kids and staff that are there, and then the district as a whole. But it seems to be a standard in the area, and we've kind of grabbed onto it and stuck with it.
I would also reiterate that we are collecting and looking at this data every day for every building. And so that is not the percentage with which we start looking at data. We will have been looking at that all along. This is an added checkpoint where we say now we need a district level review to go in and look at it again, get a new lens and a new look at that to make sure that there are not additional measures such as an adaptive pause that we should be utilizing. It also is something that prompts us to start working with the Department of Public Health. We expect, and we should expect, that we're going to have positive cases, but we should also be prepared that as those numbers rise, we're working in concert with different entities to make team decisions on how we best move forward.
Okay, next, Maureen will walk us through the instructional updates. Maureen?
Yes, thank you. I have a few updates about our instructional plans. I want to start with the hybrid schedule, some of the highlights. We officially begin that new schedule this Wednesday, January 13th, which is one day prior to the start of in-person instruction on January 14th. We're starting one day early to give students and staff a chance to acclimate to the new schedule, particularly for Ridge and the junior highs, who now will have a much earlier start time in the hybrid schedule. We, of course, also encourage staff to begin preparing students even today and tomorrow, talking about what that will look like, helping them prepare for that hybrid schedule. A few other notes about that, about the schedule. In the hybrid schedule, the start and end time for staff is 15 minutes earlier than usual. This really allows us to have truly all hands on deck for student entry and dismissal. Those were 2 times of the day. We really wanted to make sure we couldn't just rely on a few supervisors. We needed everyone. Students, I will also point out, will not dismiss 1 hour early on Wednesdays in the hybrid schedule. I say dismiss kind of in quotes because that is during the asynchronous time in the afternoon. But the reason for that is we needed to ensure at all levels that we met that 5-hour instructional day. And given the travel time, lunchtime needed, we were just shy of that if we continued with the Wednesday early dismissal for students. And then to reiterate a point from last time, you'll see that I added that our baseline model for hybrid will be supervised remote model. So just a few reasons for that. Hybrid with students at home and in person at the same time is brand new for us, for our staff. They've never instructed in this way before. So we want to give them some time and space to grow into that model. So that's why we established that the baseline would be supervised remote so that we can ensure an equitable experience for all students, whether they're at home or they're in person. And it also allows us to ensure teachers are very concerned about being able to give equal attention to both groups. So this helps them get started on that in a very successful way, being able to instruct both groups. I'd also add that the majority of students on any given day will be remote. So that is a natural starting point. And in addition, if an in-person student needs to stay home for some reason, they will have the same experience as if they had attended in person. We, of course, in October had training for staff on other simultaneous strategies and methods, and we will continue to revisit those. We're not going to restrict staff from trying other ways to engage both remote and in-person students, but the supervised remote gives a starting point for everyone to be successful. So those were just a few. I wanted to just highlight some of the why behind that. Regarding schedules, I added links there in case you wanted to look in more detail, but I'll go through those and just some highlights in a moment. A few other comments, and that is first, snow days, which seems so strange to even think about anymore. But remember that we do have an approved e-learning plan. So if one of our typical inclement weather days is needed, we will revert to remote learning for that day. And the day will count as a school day. Few final thoughts on this. First of all, the expansion of hybrid and our planning with that. Knowing that our goal is to increase to full day, when we can safely do that, I wanted to assure the board that we are already working on that. What are those adjustments that we will need to make when we get to that point? And we are working to make that expanded day as long as possible, while also ensuring that staff, and particularly elementary staff, get the contractual amount of plan time. We know that this year, the amount of planning time for teachers has increased. So we want to make sure we can accommodate that in the school day. Typically, that is provided through specials classes each day. But now, since those classes need to be modified significantly due to our mitigation strategies, we will need to continue to accommodate staff plan after student dismissal until we're back to our regular operations after COVID. And then summer, I know it doesn't feel like summer, but usually by now we are preparing to enroll students for summer programming. But given the continued uncertainties, we will not be enrolling students as usual now, but we are considering and outlining ideas for how we can use the summer to offer a continuous learning option and extend that school year for students in a way that targets their specific needs. We anticipate, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as we discussed this morning, we have a heavy emphasis of expanding summer programming opportunities and then using some of our COVID relief dollars, and we'll talk more about that later, to provide free summer school services and expanded services this summer to try to address some of the learning loss and other gaps that have surfaced during the last 9 months.
So that is already in the works. And now the schedules, the elementary, and really you've seen this before. What I will just point out, you'll see that the day is divided into a 4-hour extended morning session, followed by lunch and travel, followed by asynchronous activities in the afternoon, along with small group, teacher plan time, staff office hours. That's kind of the brief picture of the elementary day. And then looking at junior high, what I will point out for you there is, first of all, that they are starting 1 hour earlier now that we have transportation and we're juggling elementary and junior high schedules. A block schedule is still being used, so students will have classes every other day. Each class period is 48 minutes, which is 2 minutes shorter than the full remote, but the max that we can accommodate in that 4-hour in-person time. However, as we look to when we are able to expand more hours, we anticipate those class periods will increase to up to 80 minutes each. So we do have our teachers are really struggling to have enough instructional time. So we hope that when we get to that expanded, we'll really make up for that by having additional time. So just a few instructional points to share tonight.
Katie, would you work through the health and safety updates, please?
Yes. We discussed earlier, and Tom Ludloff described very well how we would use a staff and student population rate of 3% having COVID-19 or being a probable case as a way for us to trigger discussions with the Department of Public Health about possible adaptive pauses. In addition to that, we always review all epidemiologically linked cases. Anytime there is a potential for any internal spread, we're looking at that and reviewing it very closely to make sure that we're acting very quickly in those cases. Over the last month, we've also seen changes in quarantine guidance, first from CDC, then from IDPH, and now from Cook County. And the guidance now says that for adults, it is appropriate to consider a 10-day quarantine. And again, for adults, we can consider a return after 7 days if certain criteria are met. That would be if the person has been asymptomatic the entire time, if they were to take RT-PCR COVID-19 test, which came back negative, and if that test was taken on certain days after the contact. So that is something that we can consider utilizing for our staff. Our PPE requirements have stayed largely the same, and our face coverings will be necessary everywhere unless students are outside and socially distanced or eating. And we have a few more mitigation strategies to share. Our self-certification started last week. Our A group will start tomorrow so that we can catch in advance anyone that we need to speak to about their health-related issues prior to the start of school, and those will continue. Our staff rollout was very successful, and we are working with our parents right now to make sure they have everything that they need to be able to self-certify effectively next week, or sorry, later this week. Our IDPH guidance remains the same in terms of outbreaks. If we were to see 5 COVID-19 infections within a 14-day class period in one classroom or learning area, we would absolutely be looking at adaptive pauses and working with the Department of Public Health. And our supervision largely remains the same as well.
Thank you, Katie. Ron, could you walk through the mitigation strategies for transportation and food service?
Absolutely, thank you. So for transportation, all students and drivers are expected to wear masks on the bus. There will be extras as well in case anyone forgets theirs. And at the bus barns, vendor employees will be checked for any temperatures and other mitigating factors before driving our students. There will also be assigned seating. This will assist the district with knowing locations of students in the event of a possible exposure. CCSD59 will continue providing meals in a safe manner. Since the beginning of our school closure in March, we've distributed over 450,000 meals to students and families across the district. In-person junior high students will be sent home with breakfast and lunch, while elementary students will be provided a snack during in-person school hours and sent home with the lunch. A note, beginning Thursday, January 14th, remote pickup will occur every school day, and we just found out about that recently, today actually. Spots are going to remain at John Jay, Devonshire, Grove, and Holmes, and then buses will also provide food at Black Hawk, Oasis, Willoway, and the Bussey Road Apartments. And now I will hand it over to Ross Vittori.
Good evening, everyone. I'll give an update on 3 key items related to staffing and the transition to hybrid. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act, FERCA, ADA accommodations, and classroom coverage. As you may have seen in the memo that went out to staff, which has a bit more detail to it, FERCA did expire on December 31st. However, there are some options for employers to, on their own, extend some of those pieces. Our approach was to maximize staff supports without sacrificing any of our student-driven programming needs. So while the childcare piece under FERCA has ended, a support that we worked out with our partnerships is that staff that do have childcare needs based to COVID closures will be at school for in-person learning, but could then finish their day remotely at home so they could get home to provide some childcare support. We also saw under FERCA that if a staff member or an employee had to stay home due to quarantining, that they would receive paid sick leave. The importance in this is for staff members that could potentially have COVID or have a positive case, you wouldn't want anyone in a position where they would need to come to work in order to get their paycheck or if they didn't have enough sick time. So we are working on an MOU that I hope to bring to the board at one of our next meetings. I'll give an update in the board update, but with our partners, we would like to extend that for us, our staff. If a staff member has COVID or has to quarantine because a household member has COVID, then we would want to provide that paid sick leave so that we can keep everyone at school as safe as possible and also take care of our staff. The biggest clarification for ADA accommodations is that we're always providing ADA accommodations. The thing that was different with COVID was that it allowed for some options, some accommodation options that are not typical for us, and that is that remote work piece. ADA requires that we engage in an interactive process to determine if reasonable accommodations are possible without creating an undue hardship. So in a school setting, when all students are at home learning for an adaptive pause, if a teacher, for instance, needed to work remotely, we could do that. That would not create an undue hardship for a school district. But when students are here in our classrooms, we physically need people and teachers here with our children. So that was something we worked and clarified with staff. Now, again, through our partners and through some amazing hard work and creativity with our building leaders, we are still going to accommodate as many remote learning accommodations as possible for those who qualify for them through ADA. We do have some staff members with some serious health conditions, and we have found the right balance, we believe, to make sure that we are not sacrificing any programming and can maximize the supports for our staff. We are also going to revisit this. We're looking at a February 9th right before conferences. And just as my teammate shared earlier, we're watching numbers. We're going to see how everything begins, and we will adjust accordingly. If we need to extend this, and we can, we will. Hopefully, if things are moving in the right direction, we'll start moving back to our end goal, of course, which is opening school fully. And finally, we are going to extend our use of our sub pool. We have been using subs for long-term leaves, but we will be using them on a more daily basis. We're still not certain if we'll have a tremendously large sub pool. That has been an issue in years past, and it is still an issue now, but we are opening that up. And we are providing some incentives. As Maureen shared, the in-person day for students is not a full day. So we will hire subs to cover for that in-person time, but we will pay them the full day rate. So we're excited about getting that going. And then teachers are often only able to use half time or half days for time off, because you can't, if you're a third grade teacher, take off just 10 to 11 a.m. So usually you have to take off the whole morning. We are implementing the option to take time off hourly, and our building leaders have done a nice job to say, we will try to provide internal coverage if that allows a staff member more support with picking up their own child or getting here, so they're here for our students. So I was really proud of the efforts there as well. So through those three main categories, District 59 is extending as many supports as possible without sacrificing our programming. And again, special thanks to Ann Wing, our partners, and all of our building leadership members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. So next steps, final planning and preparation steps, we're going to review with our ALTA on Tuesday. That would be tomorrow. So we'll make sure that we are answering any questions that our leaders at the building and district level may have. We're going to have a meeting with the full district staff on Wednesday, the 13th, to share this information. They've seen it several times, so this will serve as a reminder. Doing a lot to really reinforce our internal mitigation strategies, use of PPE, talk through some of the procedural pieces for that, talk through and just remind staff what to do if the self-certifications aren't in place. Again, just a bunch of final reminders and repetition of information. We did get an estimated projected amount for our stimulus dollars, which is $3.8 million. As I had shared previously with the board, this is nearly 4 times as much as we received round one, which is the common approach for all school districts, and it's based on our Title I numbers. So again, some of the dollars earmarked right away will be PPE, mask shields. We have purchased plexiglass, and we're ordering placemats. We'll look at utilization for tech devices and software expenditures, training, tutoring, and then, as I indicated a little earlier, more extensive summer programming, and then also for mental health services and supports for our students. So those are the updates that we have in preparation for launching our B group on Thursday. At this point, we'd like to respond to any questions that board members may have related to the reopening.
This is Courtney. Thanks so much for all of the efforts and preparation. It's just clear that a lot of energy and thinking has gone into it. I have a question for Ron about the busing. Will you remind us, in addition to the driver, are we going to have other adult supervision on the bus?
That's something that we are aiming for. Initially, we thought that we were able to have one for every bus, but then I know that the vendors have had issues with hiring. So that's been one of our problems.
Patty, did you want to say something?
I did. I have 2 things. One, what do we have numbers of kids? How many kids are staying remote and how many are hybrid?
Yes, we do. So we collected and finalized that data on Friday. I do believe it went out in the Friday update, but we can reshare that data, and it is broken out by the A group, B group, and the students staying remote.
I actually have it. It was 54.7. We're doing in-person, remote 45.3. In October 2020, it was 60% in-person.
Yeah, we were about 400 kids less in person than originally indicated in the fall.
And also, I don't know if this is the spot, but I was thinking about this because they're talking about trying to up like the doses, and that teachers and staff would be eligible for the shots. Are you guys going to roll it out like you do the flu vaccine possibly, or is that something you could think about, that you'd have those stations for teachers, or would they have to go get that themselves, or is there something the district is thinking about? I'm sure that's been on your mind, but.
Yes, we've already signed up to be a host site. Katie, you want to talk about the details with that? I think that you had shared some information earlier.
Sure. The Cook County Department of Public Health has has put out a sign up for those who are interested in receiving more information about vaccinations. Along with that, we were able to sign up as a provider, as somebody who has the staff who are equipped and able to provide the vaccine. So Cook County is aware, and we called this morning, and Denise Webster, our health coordinator, talked with somebody to make sure that all of our information was in and accurate. So they know that we are very interested in helping to administer vaccines, especially for our staff. And if that helps to expedite the process, that certainly is our hope. We know that they're still working in Cook County on their healthcare staff and hospital staff and having them vaccinated at this point, with the hope that that will be wrapping up soon. And then they will be moving on to their 1B group, which is first responders, educators, and agriculture, food and agriculture. So we are within that next group. We heard Governor Pritzker say that last week, that teachers are in the next group. So we're hopeful, but at this point we've done everything to make it very clear that we are willing to and able to help with that vaccine distribution.
The big challenge is the size of Cook County. And as Katie said, we've got, so many healthcare centers, hospitals in Cook County. Tom shared an interesting stat this morning that Cook County has almost 2 times more schools than all of the other 6 collar counties combined. So Lake County, DuPage County, their healthcare officials in schools and some of their second tier staff have already gotten the shot. That has not happened yet in Cook County. And again, as Katie indicated, it's because the size of Cook County, but we've been persistent in terms of trying to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. We're an approved host site, so we're just waiting for access to the vaccine. I do think what the president elected in terms of pushing out the vaccines versus holding back that second dose so that more people can have the first dose could help expedite options or access to a first dose.
Good. Thank you.
Also, Patty, are encouraging staff, if they live in other counties, they certainly would want to sign up to receive information from their counties on when vaccines may be available as well. Truly anything to make the process quicker.
I hear you, sister.
Question, Patty.
So when we hit the 3%, that's going to cause us to take a closer look as to what's going on, consult with the Department of Public Health. Is there someone at the Department of Public Health that we reach out to, or is it, I'm just worried about a delay in getting a response from the Department of Public Health?
Yeah, there are several channels of communication. So we do have a school contact. It is the same school contact as our neighboring districts that we have a direct line to for these situations. We have different types of reporting that we do electronically for certain things. And we have her number to call her in the case that we need to talk about something today as a mitigating factor and adaptive pause.
Sure, thanks.
This is Mardell. Can I make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I called my CVS today to find out when they would have the COVID vaccine, because that's where I have to go for my insurance, to the CVS. And they said that they will not, that Illinois is getting only the Pfizer, and that it will not be in until the end of February or possibly March. So, you might be able to get it sooner than that, but that's what is planned for the CVS pharmacies, and CVS is supposed to be one of the big distributors.
Mardell, there's a website that the Illinois Department of Public Health has where if you want the vaccine, any residents who want it can sign up. And the 1B wave is going to include people 65 and older. So you should get on that list and they'll notify you.
CVS, though, it's the only place I can get it.
Right, but it's still important to get on the list.
Yeah.
I think also too, just as a general comment, we've been so flexible throughout this entire process, and eventually we're going to have a new administration in place, and there's going to be a new director of the CDC in place, and there's probably going to be some new guidance in place that's going to come out from there. So it's always just kind of rolling with what punches lay ahead, because I'm sure we're going to get punched.
I really want to thank all the hard work that the administration put in with your teams to come up with some creative solutions for staffing, for making sure that, you know, our staff and our students are as safe as possible throughout this process. And it's clear that you've put in an incredible amount of work. And I'm really grateful to you for doing that.
I agree, absolutely.
Are there any other questions, comments?
Dr. Fessler, Chris Godlevich here. A quick question about where your team is as far as thoughts to move from this 2-day reduced schedule to a full day, and kind of, is there a timeline or something that's been discussed with the team?
So we're preparing. You know, we had this conversation in our planning session yesterday that we'll have everything set to go as soon as we think it's safely ready to move forward. So we have a second board meeting at the end of this month, and at that board meeting we'll bring the data to the board, discuss that data, get some direction for the board. But Ron's talking to transportation and food service to determine how much time they will need in order to update any bus routes and have our lunch service ready if we do go that route. So we will be prepared as soon as it's safely possible. And we're planning on having that conversation and sharing data with the Board of Education at the end of January board meeting.
And that, thank you for that. And that would be for something actionable in February, assuming obviously safety and all the guidelines and everything's well, or would that be more of a March thing?
It's up to the board. So I think if our goal all along has been to get back to in-person instruction as soon as safely possible. So if we get a directive from the board that January, is that the 25th?
Yes.
Mhm.
At the January 25th, the board says that this looks good. In 2 weeks, we want to go to full day hybrid, then we can do that. So at that meeting on the 25th, we'll share, you know, some of those steps that Tom Ludloff had put together prior in the early presentations, just to look at our options for extending the in-person, the full day, the hybrid, et cetera. And we can have all those conversations. And then in this Friday update, I'll update the board in terms of how much turnaround time we need to go from a half-day hybrid to a full day hybrid.
Thank you.
Courtney was next, and then Randy.
Thanks. So I have a question just related to instructional time. So Maureen had made the point when talking about the junior high schedule that the classes were losing 2 minutes, it sounds like, from what they were in remote. I just wanted to understand if the synchronous instruction time was changing in any other respect at the junior high level, and then if there's any net difference at the elementary school level in the new schedule.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I should clarify that 2 minutes of the synchronous class time. We still have this, you know, the same length of day, but the class periods that are synchronous are shortening just a bit. At the elementary level, we were really able to accommodate pretty closely the remote to the in-person. And to what we ended up really doing though was, you know, kind of have the same priorities each day, but really we needed to give more flexibility to the teachers, especially with coverage situations. So we kind of laid out, here are the subjects that will occur each day, here are the approximate number of minutes, but when those happen within their 4-hour window might be different from classroom to classroom, just because they're going to be juggling so many factors there.
Well, I would say well done on maintaining the same amount of synchronous instructional time, because I think that was a puzzle, and well done at solving it.
And we're eager, we'll also be eager to, you know, extend that when we can, so that the that synchronous time is even increased.
Okay, good. Randy?
So I just want to follow up on Chris's question, just for more clarification. Are we looking to extend the in-person day, or are we looking to go to 4 days with like merging groups A and B? What's the kind of priority? Are we looking to extend the day first and then possibly going to 4 days?
Yes, that would be correct. I think
a shorter day.
I think we would want to extend the AB schedule from a half day to a full day as a first step. Look at the data on that, revisit it at the the following board meeting and then discuss future options. But I think, we would take one step at a time. So same kind of schedule as we have now, but instead of having a half day with no lunch, we would have a full day of instruction with a lunch. And again, we will continue to have the remote option available until the governor otherwise indicates that it's no longer a necessary option, or the board indicates that it's no longer a necessary option in conjunction with the governor.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
I have a question about the lunches. The last I heard, the lunches were going to be in refrigerated containers on the bus, and the children would take them as they exited the bus. Is that still the plan?
That is correct.
That's good. I think that's an excellent solution for worrying about whether they would start to eat their lunch on the bus. So that's a good idea.
All right, thank you.
Oh, good job, everybody.
The next discussion topic is just a follow-up from our last board meeting. Ron and I put a few slides together just to review some of the work that we're doing in facilities and finance committee meeting. These slides address the conversation that we're having about being proactive in addressing current space issues and then potential space issues that we might have. So as directed by the committee members, the first thing that we're doing is an internal review of the space within our schools. Again, this is repeat information from the last board meeting. So review of enrollment numbers, review of specialized programs, review of available space. Through that, we have internally identified that we have some needs at Brentwood and at Claremont in terms of some additional classrooms needed. In talking with our architects and our contractors, as we shared before, projected cost of additional classroom is $500,000 per classroom. What the facilities committee is recommending, however, is that we conduct a demographic study. The last demographic study occurred in 2012. This will determine future growth patterns throughout the district to guide our space-related decisions prior to spending or committing to any additions or spending dollars. So our next step is that Ron identified 3 different groups of demographers and got quotes from 3. The facilities committee at our last meeting narrowed it to 2. We're developing a series of questions for the demographer. The questions are really intended to clearly understand what type of feedback we can expect. Like, can they give us recommendations for boundary adjustments if necessary? Can they really show us where future growth is going to be and then help us to make some, or can they make some suggestions about adjustments that we would like to do that? Can they look at our programming needs and provide some feedback based on some of their future projections of where programs might want to move to in order to free up some space? So those are some of the questions we discussed. Ron has lined up interviews with the firms on January 15th. At least that's our target date in the afternoon. He and I will send a draft of the questions that we have to our facilities committee members. They can add to those. We'll do that tomorrow, and then we'll secure that date. The facility team is welcome to join those conversations. And then we're going to bring a recommendation back to the board. The costs for the demographic study, I think 2 of the firms were at 12.5, one was at 15. So the facilities committee felt comfortable with any of the 3, but wanted to really narrow down to the one that we thought would be the best demographer for our district. And then we'll develop a scope and timeline for the demographic work that will be done. So once we get an approval from at the next meeting, I'm sorry, we'll bring back much more detail. So this will be a discussion getting ready for an approval at the February meeting. And at that time, we'll have the scope and the timeline outlined. So that's just an overview and an update, but also wanted to provide the board an opportunity if they have questions or would like to further discuss this. Ron or other members of the facility committee, if there's anything that I forgot to say, please jump in and add any detail.
I have a request, and that is not that I'm trying to second guess anybody. but I would like to get a list of the pros and cons of the two firms and why one was chosen over the other, so that I have some sort of conceptual idea of what went into that decision.
I guess the other question I'd be interested in, I guess I should back up and say at a basic level, I definitely support that it's time to do this. I think it's been 8 years and I'm interested to know what those growth patterns are. The big thing that comes to mind that I'd want to harmonize in this situation is the fact that we're about to launch this equity audit, right? Like that's one of our next steps in the equity space. And I just want to make sure that we connect these two processes, right? Because if the equity audit reveals we're not paying enough attention to this group, and that's divorced from the demography study that we paid no attention to this group, and like, I just want to make sure those could potentially speak to each other, if that makes sense. But as long as we can move them both forward in tandem and harmonious with each other, I think that'd be ideal.
You know, Courtney, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I wish I thought of it myself. I'm glad you did, because I think it's absolutely critical. And those are the kinds of issues that you absolutely want to discuss when you're talking about equity. So.
Dr. Fessler, quick question. After the last study in 2012, did we take any action as far as construction of new space or anything like that?
We actually made some attendance boundary shifts, which ironically, you know, a couple of years later caused some significant increase in enrollment at Grove. So it actually shifted the issue from Friendship, where we were beginning to have some pretty significant growth, and then unfortunately got extreme growth at Grove the next couple of years. So, you know, it's not an exact science, right. And most of the demographers give you ABC projections. Most oftentimes, you know, they tell you to look at the middle projection, but I'll attach, or I'll include the most recent study in this Friday's update, so you can kind of see their approach. You'll see that there's a pretty wide band within those projections. So although they use a lot of science and data,
still hard to predict the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, wasn't it partly utilized to determine when and how we could return programs back to the schools, the neighborhood schools?
We'd made a commitment to return, right? That we had made the commitment going into the process to return, you know, students to their home schools wherever possible. So, you know, we one big step in that process was building the Early Learning Center, which allowed us, you know, to not use 5 of our schools for early learning, freed up some spaces, allowed us to go to full day kindergarten in all of our schools. So that was a big part of it. And then we looked at, you know, we did expand our dual language program at that point in time too, so that we also could return kids back to school, because we were satelliting that program at a handful of schools, and we expanded it to a few more. And that helped us to accomplish that goal more closely.
Right. And I think the demographic data played into that. The other thing about the demographic data was that they really dug really deeply into it. And they could even say to us things like, well, the average maternal age in the Grove cluster is 45. So don't expect to get a lot more students coming into the schools, at least just yet. So it was interesting, but then when we followed it through, it got pretty inexact, especially the further out you went. And it's understandable because, you know, the demographer isn't controlling who moves and when, and, you know, how many kids someone has and so on. But it was very insightful to have that information available, even though it had limited utility beyond a certain point. So it's still worth doing it again, but it certainly has its limitations.
Yeah, and in the end, it's another data source and resource, and it's objective and as scientific as possible. And that will help substantiate the decisions that we make moving forward. Again, before we commit to spending, 500,000, $1 million, or 1.5 million on additional spaces, when we know that we have spaces across our district or buildings across our district that have some room.
I think
Right.
I think one thing that we did learn when Ron did talk with the demographers was, there's some uncertainty that's been thrown in there with the whole COVID too. So that's something we have to consider when we get these results back and when they decide on. We need to kind of take a step back and say, okay, hey, we've done this, but we also have this new data point, which we'll call it, that is completely unknown to what's happening right now and how that could impact our numbers. So we just got to keep that in mind when we're going through this whole thing.
Yep. So the other thing is, on the first slide, it said it happened to just mention the projected costs under Claremont, but I'm assuming that those projected costs are going to be the same or roughly the same, regardless of whether it's at Brentwood or Claremont, or is that not true?
That's true. The 500K actually was connected to the Brentwood, but they indicated that we should count on roughly 500K per classroom. So, but that was a projected cost for the Brentwood addition.
Okay, because I think there's specific issues. Do we know roughly, given at least what we know right now, how many classrooms we're looking at Brentwood and at Claremont? I think at Brentwood it's 2.
2 at Brentwood for sure. Ron, what was the Claremont number? Is it 1?
1 right now because of the growing, the dual language program. So 1 is right now.
Right, okay. Any other questions?
The Polish dual language programs that finishing up their 3rd grade, right? With the additional class, well, they would need almost 2 classrooms, wouldn't they? In the next couple of years, I thought.
I think for next year, it's just 1 additional classroom, though it's rolling up to 4th grade. I'm sorry, the 2 sections is rolling up to 4th grade.
Okay, so then the next year they'd be rolling up to another one up to 5th grade.
Yeah. Then they'll have the 2 classes K through 5 at that point.
So does that mean 2 classrooms, Maureen?
No, because I think they still had some space. They were reutilizing some of the spaces they had.
Okay.
So we did have a little bit of time until it was truly a critical need for that room. Let me check. They may be rolling up the 2 classes to 5th grade. Let me double check on that.
All right, we'll provide an update of that in the Friday update.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you. The last one is just the, as you know, this is something that we're required by ISB to review and pass every 2 years. So this is a prevention of and response to bullying, intimidation, and harassment. And again, it must be reviewed and reevaluated every 2 years. This is the policy. I think the interesting thing to note is the restorative measures. That's something that Katie and her team have done, I think, a tremendous job ever since Senate Bill 100 passed several years ago of really working hard to providing alternative measures to exclusionary disciplines such as suspension and expulsion. Again, this is a law that was passed, I think it was 5 years ago. And we were in a position, because of the stuff that we were doing with restorative practices, to really make an aggressive move. I know this was a big challenge in all of our schools because it was such a significant shift. But again, I think that is something where we've made great strides in the last couple of years. All of the other information should be pretty familiar to you all. Any questions about this piece or any discussion?
The only thing I would say is we have the Marines as a complaint manager.
Yeah, that'll be Katie next year.
That can be changed quite easily without board approval kind of stuff?
Yeah, this will be for this year. If we make the change, next year the board should approve just the change next year to Katie.
We have a number of policies that oftentimes have or try to have male, female managers of that process, whether it's non-discrimination, complaints, equity, those are Title IX, I should say, those types of things. So annually we review them and update. It would just likely just go to the board as one of the standard updates to clean that piece up over the summer.
And
Go ahead, Mardell.
I was just going to say, I agree with what Art had said, because in the past, I recall we had many expulsion programs. There was one time when we had 13 of them, and students were expelled. Some of them were sent to the special school over in Mount Prospect or Des Plaines, wherever that is, for children who were fairly incorrigible and so forth. So we have made great strides, and I appreciate what Katie has done in the schools, because I'm sure it's helped.
I agree. I think it's really important. I have two questions. One is that we just did this review last week with NSSEO with it's the same items, and there were a lot more discussion items than just this. So do we have an opportunity to review them all? I know most of them were minor changes.
I think they're for January 25th meeting.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. And then the other one is that I know that early on, and I'm sure this has changed quite a bit, there was some retraining that needed to be done and expectation setting with staff who were used to being able to take disruptive students and send them to the office. And with restorative justice and these practices, a lot more of the work is being expected of the teachers. How are we doing as far as the amount of training that has been needed to get to where we are able to really respond more socially appropriately to the needs of students in the classroom?
Katie?
Over the past 5 years, we've really embedded a lot of training with all of our buildings in terms of multiple topics that feed into that same theme: trauma-informed practices, restorative practices, equitable disciplinary practices, really thinking about logical consequences rather than punitive consequences. And so not only have we taken that approach with professional learning and training for our building staff, but we also have job-embedded professional learning. And so specifically, Ashley Robertson, our Director of Social Emotional Learning and Equity, Lindsay Frank, our climate and SEL coach, are able to give even more extensive and personalized training to our staff within the classroom in terms of their climate and their classroom management. We also have a very clear classroom climate and management plan that our staff keep that outline equitable practices in terms of expectations and consequences and family involvement. So I would say that that is very much ongoing, not necessarily a set time every year, but embedded in really all that we do, and implemented with very specific goals in mind, such as trauma-informed or restorative practices.
Well, it sounds like you made a lot of progress in shifting the understanding about why we do this and how it should be done, and then having Lindsay and Ashley available to do some just-in-time support to teachers who may find for the first time that they have a particularly difficult situation, and to help them navigate that with the student, and then if the student is beyond being supported in that way, then there are other alternatives that can take place, but that is clearly the first place to start. And I'm so glad that this work is being done and continues to be done. And so I'm really proud of our district for our leadership in this area.
Thank you, Janice. We also, I think our MTSS planning teams play a significant role in providing resources for classroom discipline and strategies, tier 1 through 3. So that's another regular support, especially at the elementary level. And we're getting better with it at the middle level as the MTSS process evolves at the middle level. So
that's
those
great.
are great resources for our staff too.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
So I guess as a next step, oh, this was just a discussion item. I'm sorry. I was going to make a motion, but we're just.
That's
Well,
correct.
if you want to make a motion, you can. We just don't, we can't vote on it because we don't have it on there for action, but I think it's great work. Okay, I guess we're up to the consent agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I can do it. It's Courtney, since I'm eager to make a motion, apparently.
There
Okay.
you go.
Be it resolved that on the 11th day of January, 2021, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approved the consent agenda as presented and amended, including section 7.01, approval of minutes prior meeting, 7.02, disbursement resolution, 7.03, acceptance of financial reports, 7.04, acceptance of recommendations, human resources report, and 7.05, approval to destroy 18-month-old or older closed session recordings.
Excellent job, Courtney. Do we have a second?
Mardell will second it.
Oh, wait, Mardell, did you second?
Yes, I did.
Okey doke.
All right, roll call, please.
Okay. Garlovich,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Mencia,
Aye.
Charlie, I, Reed,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
and Krinsky.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, excellent. We're moving right along here. We have actually, surprisingly, I haven't seen this in a long time, no action items besides the consent agenda. So we're going to move on to 9.0 special interest topics.
Good evening. Since the last report to the Board of Education, we have had 0 FOIA requests.
Oh my gosh. Yay, holidays, right?
Don't say anything. Let's just move on.
Okay.
Yeah, right? Sounds good. Sounds very good. Okay, we're up to new and continuing business and announcements. Does somebody have any of those? Okay, seeing none. Let's move on to reports of the Board of Education. Do we have any reports?
So we've prepared a couple of links that I think Randy's going to walk us through to highlight the facilities and finance committee updates. Is that correct, Randy?
Sure, I can do that. Basically, Ron, the facility and the finance committee meet last week, Monday. I think we met for about 2 hours. We covered a lot of topics. So the things listed here, there's a bunch of topics, so I'll quickly try and breeze through them. The first one is the Rupley Elementary upgrades, the media library room layout, and the extra sensory room for special education. Last year, the board approved a $20,000 grant from Enchanted Backpack. I know Diana O'Connell, principal at Rupley, worked very hard to get this grant, and she wants to use it to upgrade their library and their extra sensory room that the special education students use. In the Friday update from last week, there was a presentation with a bunch of pictures of the library and the extra sensory room. It's quite outdated. She wants to create a modern learning environment where we can, update what we have in those spaces to make it more educational friendly for the students. There's mismatched lighting in there. There's very old equipment, and they just want to take this time to upgrade it. So what's going on is they're, right now, Ron, Albert, and Diana are working together, put together what kind of plan, what they really want to do. So that's kind of in the planning stages right now. So hopefully they'll have something in the next couple of months that we can present to the board. That $20,000 grant will go a long way to help defer the cost, but it won't cover the whole cost of what we need to do. And we really want to do this to make sure that this library is on par with the other libraries we have within the district. Are there any questions about that?
I have one.
Go ahead, Courtney, go ahead.
Okay, I was just wondering a ballpark of when you said the grant will not quite cover it, like what is our ballpark total cost we're looking at?
We don't have one because we really don't. They're in the initial planning stages of what they want to do. I mean, Christmas break and everything for the holiday break, you know, really hasn't been, they haven't really been able to accomplish much. So, I mean, that's why we're hoping to have something maybe for the Ron, maybe for the February meeting.
We'll have some contractors come out soon. Let me see who we book first, and then you'll see something on the Friday update.
That's great. I like the pictures. I could see where things were outdated. And when I looked at that special education extrasensory room, it didn't look like any extrasensory room I've seen at NSSEO, for example. So I know that a lot could be done to make it more helpful to students. And I'm really proud of Diana's work and the work of Ron and Randy, of course, and Albert on trying to improve this for our students. So I look forward to hearing more about it.
And the next item we talked about was the LED lighting, and that's kind of when we talked, I kind of mentioned that in the December board meeting, that we're basically looking to potentially change all lighting out to LEDs, including our, you know, the fixtures and the lighting out to LEDs from in the parking lot and throughout the building. With the winter break, not much has been done. We will not be doing anything this summer related to it. We want to get prepared just in case there are incentives and rebates that come up. We want to be able to be prepared and ready to take advantage of that when it comes.
And I think, Randy, didn't we say that also ComEd might be coming up with something so we don't know until we hear from ComEd how far we want to go with this.
Right. So, I mean, that was what I was saying. We know it all depends on what kind of incentives and, you know, rebates are become available. So, I mean, this is kind of one of those things that we're going to keep an eye out. We're going to kind of come up with a straw figure plan per se, so that when something does come available, we can kind of jump on it pretty quickly and take advantage of that savings, because there will be some savings not only in, you know, upgrading our lighting, make it better lighting for learning purposes, but also for energy savings.
Yeah, this is a little bit of an aside, but I was wondering, since you're talking about grants and savings, are we looking again to see if the opportunity for solar might come our way to once again try to take advantage of that? Are you tracking that?
Yeah, we know about, we're still waiting on SRECs. They have not released any of their SRECs. The extent, what happened was we were planning to do some solar last year.
Right.
And we did we did an application for it and stuff like that. And basically by the time we were able to get the application and everything into this thing, all the SRECs for schools and commercial had been, had not been expired, but had basically been spoken for.
Right.
So right now we're kind of waiting for them to maybe free up or create some new, what they call SRECs, or for some of the ones for some school districts, maybe let theirs expire. Now they were supposed to expire, but I believe the state extended the amount of time that they had to use them.
Okay.
So we're just kind of wait. We're kind of in limbo waiting on that.
Because that'd be pretty easy for us, since you did all the work before, to put together an application if the money becomes available. So hopefully that would be, you know, really helping to make the whole process more expedient, and then maybe we could tap some of that money.
Yes, I mean we have everything ready to go, so we just kind of have to wait.
And I don't remember what schools were we talking about, because we weren't talking about solar everywhere. What were the sites that were under consideration?
I think that some of the key ones would be, well, we were originally considering Salt Creek, or sorry, Bird and Devonshire, because we had basically done full roofs on those two schools this past summer. So we wouldn't want to put solar panels on any of our schools until after we've done the roof work. So the two schools that we could theoretically do right now would be Brentwood. Was it Brentwood? No.
It definitely was Bird. I remember Bird.
Bird and Devonshire, those are the ones that got a complete overlayment or a complete roof replacement. So those are the two that would be ready. Those two schools would be ready for solar right now. The rest of the schools would need to wait until after we finish phase 2 project, where I'll talk about later.
Okay, thank you.
So the next item is the commissary. I know this is kind of a hot topic for some people. Originally, the commissary, there was some discussion about having a commissary put in the old Lively building. And some of the local residents were worried about the noise and the traffic coming in and out of those at strange hours. Our current contract with Organic Life, I believe, expires on June 30th of 2021. Am I correct on that, Ron?
That is correct.
So we're kind of looking at, hey, what can we do from a perspective of maybe looking at the district having its own commissary. And we were considering looking at properties within the business park. We didn't feel that was proper to put it in the Lively building because of where the district was located. It wasn't really centered for getting stuff to some of our north schools. So we're looking at looking at different properties and the costs associated with it. There are positives for both sides of it, and we're still kind of in the process of really going through and digging into the numbers related to that.
And Art, perhaps you could ask our person in charge of the school lunch programs if there's been any change since our early talk about the need for a commissary, because maybe it's not even needed now. I mean, we have to find out what the situation is with our food service people.
Well, when we go back to the reason that it was investigated to start with, was because we weren't even getting very many people that were willing to try to
bid for us.
Get the contract, because they found it too difficult to manage the logistics of that. And the company we had before that had lost so much money. So
right.
I still think
we find out, because we haven't had a meeting of the food committee for a long, long time. So I haven't heard anything about this because I'm not on that committee, but we haven't met. So I have no idea what's up now.
I understand what you're saying, Mardell, but I don't think that the basic issue has changed over what it was before. One of the things I'd like to ask you to reconsider is to think about possibly putting it in at the Lively property, because it's plumbed. There was already a plan for it. There was already a design for it. And people, now that they see the building there, may not feel that it's as invasive as they thought it was going to be. And it's not even across from any homes, because the location is north of the building. And it would be so much cheaper, I think, to put it there, because then we don't have to pay rent at another facility. So I'd still like to see, because the people who were objecting before may not be objecting this time.
You're right. It's not even up on the street. It's closer to the Park District property.
Right.
I know, but you're still not, I mean, you're still going to have more traffic with the trucks and more noise with trucks going in and out than you would with.
But you only have it past the Park District and the doctor's office. It wouldn't be any more traffic in the residential area, I don't think.
Right, other than the trucks that would have to run to the schools to deliver the food.
Mm-hmm.
I'd still like to keep it on the table, even though it may not be viable. I think there's some financial pluses to it. If that's okay with you guys.
Sure, we might as well study everything.
Okay.
Fine. I think I'll move on to the construction phase 1 and 2. Can you open that link, or is it open? Yeah. So the first thing we want to do is note we did able to reclaim some rebates from phase 1, almost $39,000. You can see on the PowerPoint. That's from energy savings. And right now, phase 2, we're looking at some anticipated of almost $73,000 of rebates that we've been able to obtain from the energy savings through the roofing, through the updated HVAC systems, those type of things. So that's kind of a nice little windfall related to that, not only from those things. So as you look at the spreadsheet that Albert has prepared and Ron has looked at, the areas in the gray have been completed. You notice that's mostly phase 1. There are some phase 2 things on there that have already been completed. Everything else out there that is not in gray is what's going to be done this spring and summer.
Cool.
It's a pretty arduous task for this summer. Doug and CTS have assured us that they will be able to get it all done. One thing they have done is they have assigned 2 project managers due to the volume of the projects being done. Also, they are working on maybe trying to get some stuff done while school is in progress. That would be like under the BAS, it's called the Business Automation System, the Building Automation Systems. So that's kind of what stuff they may be able to do right now when kids are in school, as long as it doesn't distract or interfere with student learning. One thing great about this great start that we've had is that CTS has been able to order all the equipment they've needed for this summer, and they've started receiving some of it already. With the whole COVID pandemic, that lead time has been very beneficial for them because, you know, we don't know what's going to happen related to supplies and materials and stuff needed for this type of projects and stuff. So I want to, you know, I know Robert and Albert have been really impressed with CTS. And I want to thank them for all they're doing. They've been wonderful partners through this whole process, and hopefully that, you know, we get all this done and we will have some pretty top shape schools, especially next year when the kids come back. And as you can see, there's a lot of roof work done there. Once that's done, and going back to Janice's question, the solar energy, once, you know, those roofs are done, we can really consider putting solar energy on more buildings.
This is really great. I'm so glad that you found all this extra money through energy savings and stuff, and that you were able with CTS to get such good pricing that you were able to add back some projects that we didn't think we could get done. So
Yeah.
this is a really
the other great
excellent-
benefit is that there are no change orders, Janice. So whatever number they gave us, they're locked into that. So that has been nice. We've come in, correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, but some of our original estimates were around $40 million, and I think we're under 30 million. So we had not only significant cost savings to begin with, but they're guaranteed. So we've not had any change orders, and there have been a couple of examples where there have been additional costs, and CTS has absorbed them.
Yeah,
That's
So
amazing. Yeah.
so some examples of just based on the cost savings and stuff like that we've been able to accomplish. All those, the business automate, the BAS, we were only going to do that in about 5 or 6 buildings that were getting HVAC, complete HVAC systems. Now, basically, every one of our buildings will have a building automation system, and it'll be one platform. So our maintenance and individuals will only need to be trained on one platform. So this is truly making it not only our buildings more efficient and upgraded systems, but it's all putting them onto one type of system that we can easily work on and maintain within our own cells.
Yeah, Randy and Mardell and Ron and Albert, you've done such an amazing job. I think this really is something to celebrate because it shows how a fiscally conservative approach to taking care of the needs of the physical plants can be done and done well. And I mean, this is really an example of the best possible outcomes. So I want to really thank all of you for the hard work that you've put in on this.
And Robert too. Robert, you know, he's also.
Yeah, that's right, Robert. He's the quiet one here.
I'm the quiet, humble one.
And Dr. Fessler is there too.
So yeah, so the quiet, humble one also deserves thanks for his work on this.
Well, our finance and materials and maintenance meetings are running around 3 hours long, so we are putting in a lot of time.
Well, it's paying off.
So the last thing, the last thing is kind of different, the finance overview. Right now, kind of let everybody know, we have we're $2 million under budget for this year. Most of that savings is related to the busing, the new contracts that we had Ron had negotiated with our busing company, and with professional development and the travel associated with some of the professional development. We're seeing, so right now we're at $2 million surplus, which is great, but because we don't know what the future is going to hold related to this whole COVID and other things, you know, we still need to, we as a districts still need to be financially responsible and careful with our finances.
Just because we've saved a little bit or got a little bit back here and made it look a lot better, doesn't mean we can just go out and spend it. We have to be very careful.
Oh, I agree, Mardell. We've got to build up those reserves. So this is great.
Exactly.
This is great news.
So
And
the next,
the future brings.
yeah, the next thing is a kind of a link. The spreadsheet is the COVID expense link. Janet Russo under Ron has been tracking our expenses that we've incurred. Some of these expenses related to extra training material, the hot spots, the extra meals that were provided all summer, you know, part of that 450,000 meals that Ron mentioned earlier. So these are just kind of a summary of those expenses. If you just go to the first page, Ron, Dr. Fessler. So as you can see so far, basically COVID inception to date, I'll call it. So basically since March, the district has spent $1.35 million on COVID specific expenses. We have received almost $1 million from the CARES Act, which basically means we spent almost $400,000 more than what the CARES Act has really provided us so far. Now, granted, there are some expenditures that have not been reimbursed, especially some of the meals that we provided have not been reimbursed. So that deficiency will kind of decrease that we currently have right now. And also, as Dr. Fessler pointed out earlier, we are projected another $3.8 million from the latest stimulus package that was signed at the beginning of this year. And that we'll start using those funds as well too. So, you know, the district has received money for the CARES Act. We've also spent a lot of money. We've also been very, you know, judicious or very frugal in that spending.
Yep.
And luckily our district is at a point right now where we can absorb some of these small losses that we're seeing right now related to COVID expenses and still not, you know, have a major financial impact on the services and, you know, the education we're offering our students.
You should try to be NSSEO. I mean, they've hardly gotten any money through the CARES Act, and they're out more than we are because of the population that they serve.
Yeah.
So, but I think you misspoke, Randy. Isn't it 2.8 million that we're getting, or is it 3.8?
3.8.
Wow, you were right. I was thinking 2.8. Good job.
Is that CARES Act money? Is that do we receive that money, or are we eligible for a reimbursement up to $3.8 million?
Get it.
Okay.
And I think I think Ron mentioned today we have until some point until 2022 to spend it. So we have a little bit. Maybe Tom, you shared that this morning, that we do have some time, so we don't have to feel obligated to spend it all during, you know, this spring. We can look into the fall of next year as well.
Are we limited as to what we can spend it on?
You know, they're actually pretty open and pretty flexible based on what we know so far. So this could help us with a lot of our expenditures. Even looking today, we were discussing the technology refresh and maybe a portion of that allocation for Title I students to offset some of those. So that could be really, really significant for us for next year.
This is the second time I've seen placemats. Are those like really literally placemats, and what are they being used for? So they can discard them after kids eat, or what?
Yeah, to help save time in cleaning. So instead of having the whole desk exposed, we can put placemats down. Ron's got some prices on those, and we've ordered some. They're pretty reasonable. Ron, what was the price for the placemats?
For 1,000 of them, they're on the spreadsheet, I believe, aren't they? On the COVID
Probably.
one?
It's okay. It's not really important. I just was surprised to see it.
So they will
Yeah,
be
a lot of the surrounding schools are using placemats and had used placemats, and they're saying that helps increase time, save time for cleaning.
Yeah,
So
I would
we'll
think
use
so.
those for our breakfast snacks. Is that the idea?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yep, for 1,000 of them, they're $11.
Cool.
And then
That's a good price.
And then we're going to have, if we do go to, when we do hopefully go to full day in person, we would need 2 per day per student, correct?
Right.
We also have ordered the plexiglass, so each classroom can have like a trifold piece of plexiglass for the teacher. if they'd like to use that, and the sound field systems have arrived or will arrive. I think they'll be at schools on Wednesday, I believe is the timeline that I've heard from Kathy Savage. Ben, do you have any information on that? Are you part of this call?
Yeah, they're supposed to be in tomorrow was the ship date and the tracking number we got. So once we get them, we'll get them out to the classrooms and then start working on the installation right away.
And then the microphones, as you guys know, we've received those and those have been in use for quite some time.
Are all the teachers using those, Art?
No, it's a 50-50. So half the classroom chose the sound fields, half chose the microphones. Now we can, with the new CARES dollars, those can be retroactive as well. So we can use the CARES dollars to actually pay for the purchase of the sound fields and the mics. I know many board members expressed concerns about the cost of the sound fields. So again, that's an expenditure we can now utilize the round 2 stimulus dollars to pay for.
Cool.
Great.
And Patty, just to clarify, not all teachers are using one or the other. They had the chance to select if they wanted to use those, if they would be useful in their classroom. So there also could be the chance to see if additional teachers want to use them in the near future after other teachers start to use them with success or whatever their experience is.
Okay.
So not all teachers have chosen one or the other at this point.
Okay, thanks.
But we ordered enough for every classroom to have one or the other. So we'll have an additional stock of those available on hand right away. Right. Any other questions about the finance or facilities? If not, I'll turn it back over to Janice for reports of the Board of Education.
Okay, are there any other reports of the Board of Education at this time? Okay, I mean, we haven't been out doing too much, I guess. So now we're up to 12.0 reports of the superintendent's team, and one of my favorite topics, and I know other people think it's a favorite of theirs as well.
Thank you, Janice. We've been doing a lot of digging in this area for the last several weeks. Katie is going to provide an update to the board in terms of what we've learned and where we're at in terms of our timeline. Katie?
So tonight I'll update on 3 topics that we discussed as action items and next steps in our last presentation on diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity. They are professional learning structures, our equity audit, and including more student and staff voice in surveys. So I'll start with professional learning. We have had 2 administrative learning sessions on diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity. One that was the video that you may have seen I shared with you from Dr. Amante Jackson. So we've done some foundational learning on those topics. We have 2 more equity focused sessions planned with the administrative leadership team. Tom has been amazing in helping to rethink and kind of rework some of our sessions for professional learning so that we can make those things happen. As well as an optional administrative book study that we've started on culturally responsive leadership. We also have in April, Midwest Principal Center is hosting Zaretta Hammond, who is the author of Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. So we are working through how we can get a group of administrators and teachers and work with our DEA to make those determinations to that session and bring back some great information from a really amazing presenter.
What's the name of, what's her name and what's the name of the?
Zaretta Hammond.
Zaretta Hammond.
And one of her more recent books is Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. And this session is focused on instructional equity. And so we'll have a good group attend and bring back information for us.
Sounds great. By the way, I just want to say to you that the video by Dr. Amante Jackson was supposed to be taken down. It's still very much alive and available. So if anybody wants to watch it, I've been actually referring it to all sorts of people, from Dr. Hackett to teachers in the district and other people who have this topic at the forefront of their mind. And if you haven't watched it, class of board members, I highly recommend it.
I will say that I've now watched it in full 4 times. And even the 4th time I was taking some pretty extensive notes. So I learned more
Yes.
when I watch.
Yes, amazing. Yeah.
In addition to that, within the realm of professional learning, I have been working with the Center for Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Teaching and Learning to plan an introductory session for administrators and then a follow-up session with all staff on the foundations and the mindset needed for cultural responsiveness within the classroom. So that is something that I'm working on right now, even today, having conversations with them on how we can get that occurring. One of the most important drivers from the subcommittee that that started this summer was that we have all staff hearing the same message at the same time. And I think that's something that we'll be able to accomplish by the end of this school year in terms of setting that foundation and that mindset for the work to come. So I'm very excited about the possibilities there. So the next piece, in addition to professional learning that we discussed in the last presentation, was a comprehensive equity audit. This has been more challenging. I have really done two kind of deep dives into options for auditors, one at the beginning of this school year and one in December and into January. And what I found is that it's very hard to get people to respond. We have also heard from at least one group that they are putting their equity audits completely on hold at this point due to the volume of requests, and one that would be available, but not until fall in our area. So it's just been more challenging to find someone who will do a comprehensive audit, not an audit of just one area of education, and has availability to do that now. So as next steps, I plan to do kind of another internet search and just see if there's anyone else that I've missed. I also plan to follow up with some of the districts that Ron and I collaborated with earlier this year that are doing similar work to see if they have any suggestions or others that they have been in contact with that I can reach out to. And then I think we need to start thinking about possibilities for a more structured internal audit if we need to go that route, or to look at specializations. So for example, there are agencies that will do an audit of policy, but they won't necessarily do focus groups, or agencies that will do an audit of instruction and curriculum, but not necessarily student services. So we could look at different options for that audit, but that has definitely been more of a challenge. And finally, in terms of student and staff voice, our social emotional learning director has been working on our Panorama surveys for this year. They are ready to go. They include topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They speak to both for students and staff, how racial ethnic identity play into their day-to-day role in the school. So this is kind of a deeper look than our sense of belonging data, which we typically gather in terms of looking more at inequities and at voice and how staff and students feel that they are able to represent themselves in their identity within the school setting. So those are ready, but right now they are on hold as we are returning to school. So we're allowing our staff and students to focus on being well in that new environment and making that transition, and then we will engage in our Panorama surveys.
I have a question about the Panorama survey. Is it really focused on anti-racism, or is it broad enough to cover, you know, LGBTQ issues and, you know, other kinds of issues that people might have beyond race?
It's broader. I can certainly add the questions that the survey will have in our board update if you'd like, but it's more about how students feel that their voices are heard, or that they're responded to, or that their identity is represented within their buildings.
Okay, I like that a lot. I really disappointed about the external auditors being unavailable, and I'm sure you felt the same way with what you've uncovered so far. But on the other hand, I think that says something important about society's, you know, approach and embracing of this important topic. So I guess as long as it's getting done, I'm happy about that.
Well, and I certainly have some next steps. And so I'm still hopeful that we will find someone with some more immediate availability. And if not, we will creatively problem solve, and we'll do the pieces that we can as quickly as we can.
If anybody can take care of that and figure it out, it's going to be you, Katie. So I'm glad you're on it. Thank you.
Katie, the Panorama surveys, are students able to like submit, like type in answers, like type in responses, or is it just clicking 1 through 5?
Yeah, that is a difference in this survey that we haven't had in Panorama to date. So yes, there are short answer options.
And Janice, I forgot during the board reports that I did find a 2013 Open Meetings Act training for school board members from the IASB convention from Melinda Selby, General Counsel, and I made copies of it. It's 24 pages long. It answers all the questions that we had about 6 months ago or so about what motions had to be made, which were necessary and so forth. And I put it in all of your boxes at the ad building, so you can either pick them up or they'll be delivered to your house eventually.
Hey, thank you.
Hey, Mardell.
Yes.
In the future, actually, if you give those to Denise, she can scan them into an electronic file and then just share them with the board members electronically, and you don't have to make copies any longer. So if you'd ever prefer to do that, we can actually provide that service quite easily.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'd prefer an electronic version because then I can save it in the appropriate file. On my
Next time I'm in
computer.
the office, then I'll have her to do this. And if you get the paper copy, that's fine. If you don't, you can get the one that's on the internet.
Thanks, Mardell.
Thanks, Mardell. I had one more question for Katie, just following up on Robert's question about being able to give a narrative answer. Do we have any mechanism of the teachers of a particular student being able to review those and like have targeted follow-up if there is something like concerning or something that they would like to address?
With our Panorama surveys, we always follow up with individuals if we see concerning data. So I would say that this would operate in the same manner, that if we saw something that was a significant concern, we would want people, the right people, to know. And, you know, the other piece of that is kind of balancing the student confidentiality. We wouldn't want students to feel, you know, that their confidence was betrayed and sharing things that don't need to be shared. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis and depends on the content that is in that survey.
Sure.
Yes.
It sounds like you're triaging it for like more of a threat to self or others type of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions for Katie on that? Well, I wish you all the luck in digging up some more possibilities, and I look forward to your next report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's it. So,
actually, one other report.
Oh, okay.
Just one other FYI. As I mentioned at the beginning, following the public comment, we're going to start the resource allocation process. Last year, we did not get to the resource allocation process because school abruptly ended. And we went to triage in terms of just trying to make sure that we were providing the best education we could for students and safety for staff, you know, within the guidelines of the governor. But this year we'd like to return to our resource allocation process, which includes a number of different things. I've asked Tom, who has facilitated that process in the past, just to quickly share with the board what to expect. And then Ross is going to share a few HR pieces connected to that. So Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Fessler. Yes, we really the last few years, the focus of our resource allocation has really been around finding efficiencies and really working kind of internally with the process. So returning to our standard process, we look to collect data from our stakeholder groups, especially our administrative group, teacher leader groups, to see if there are gaps or pieces in the system where we need to make improvements or adjustments, or even areas of really great strength that we need to make sure are deployed across the entire system. So normally we'd start that process in November, December. Obviously, we've been focused on other things, but we'll condense it into really a process this spring where we'll start to collect that data and feedback from our leadership groups, and then come and share information with the board of possible recommendations. And if we go down a path of something new or different, we'd look to the board to act on that probably in March or April. So we'll start rolling that process forward. It's really based on some guiding principles of, you know, the the resources in the district following the needs of the kids, creating consistency across our schools, ensuring for equity across our schools, and trying to align the system as best as possible. So we've worked on that since Dr. Fessler came into the district. It's led to many things like full day kindergarten, developmental kindergarten, consistency in coaching, and other SEL and other supports across the system, and really allows us to bring some recommendations forward that involve the entire district in seeing where our needs are. Ross?
Tom, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I feel like I keep interrupting tonight. Sorry. But just a follow-up question based on some of the info from public comment, I guess, about middle school math. And I guess I'm just wondering, Tom, if the resource allocation might be an opportunity to just take a look at the instructional time across those different schools and see if there is a way to equalize resources in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dr. Fessler mentioned that at the onset, or much earlier, a few hours ago in the meeting, and definitely I think is already part of the process. I think there are already discussions that have occurred regarding that.
Yeah, I agree. We had already been talking about increasing instructional minutes and support at the middle level and elementary school in terms of supports. I've also talked to Dave Schuler about any opportunities our kids may miss in math. Dave has assured me that students can get as much math as they want. Now, it may require taking summer courses, but kids can get as much math as they want during their time at District 214. Our schools have made some site-based decisions in terms of math programming. So some gaps have emerged over the years, and we do want to try to address equal access and opportunity at all three middle schools. So that will be represented in our staffing plan, which is part of resource allocation this school year.
Well, and you're talking about supports as well, correct? So that's really, are we talking then about the equity piece? So that if there are kids that need more.
That's correct. We're having conversations at the elementary level to see what that means. As you know, we have 15 schools, 11, and many more elementary schools than middle schools. So it's trying to identify the differences in supports and needs at the elementary school takes a little more time. And then, as you also know, they are different based on the demographic of our various elementary schools. So we're collecting all that information. We met with the middle school team twice in the last 2 weeks just to talk about their needs. So we have a real good handle on what the needs are at the middle level. They're working on making their recommendations. And again, thinking about increasing instructional minutes at the middle school when we have, 2-person teams at both of the 7th and 8th grade, and then multi-person teams at the elementary, that's a little bit of a potential resource issue because, we can't just add 9 teachers and add double periods of math. So we're looking at different options to bring to the board for considerations, and then details connected to what those, the benefits would be for each of the options, and additional staffing if necessary. Now, part of resource allocation is reallocating existing staff wherever possible, based on the needs. So it could be some combination of resource reallocation or a request for additional staff to meet the needs. So that's all part of the process. Ross is going to talk a little bit about some of the things HR takes into consideration as well. So if there are no other questions, Ross, you want to share your thoughts?
Absolutely. It's been fascinating to watch that process in my 3 years in HR. And even a few years ago, when we start this process and we start with leadership and building leadership, we are already starting to add data such as student enrollment, student type, programming, to make sure that it's not as simple as all 3 middle schools will get 1 counselor. We know Grove is a bigger school than Friendship and Holmes. So even over the last few years, we've really taken a look at what are the needs so that everyone has the same access, but then are we providing enough so that we have equitable access? And we've done a really nice job of slowly doing this over time. We do that through attrition. We do that when we were adding in new programming. So there aren't these massive shifts, but over time, we've made a lot of progress. We have done that. You may have noticed that with the coaching program that has evolved and grown with needs and with school size. It's really been a nice success. So as Tom said, we do look at what are the programming needs that we know about. Like dual language, we know that's rolling up at Claremont. So we know that that's a position we'll have to fill. We also then look at those needs areas, and it's always exciting with a new strategic plan because it gives a little bit of a different perspective on what those needs might be. We're also looking at known retirements. If you recall, we had a retirement incentive for some of our staff a few years ago, and this is the last year for those staff before they retire. So we have 12 certified staff members scheduled to retire and 7 ESPs. So it's also nice because we can plan ahead, and it's a pretty diverse group in terms of position type too, which is really beneficial. So we're eliminating some of those surprises by knowing and planning ahead. And then we look at the hard to fill. We know dual language has been hard to fill. We know that our early learning center, that's extremely hard to fill. You need to have the biliteracy, the special ed, and the early childhood for that position. But we are already trying different recruitment strategies. And as you know, we've tried different things over the years. Boy, we've got a couple of cool ones right now that are yielding some positive results. So it's hard to believe that it's already January. And like Tom said, we would normally start this a couple months ago, but that doesn't mean we haven't done anything with it. We have been doing this, and we are really now going to start engaging, of course, with principals once they get their schools into the hybrid plan about their needs. The last thing I'll mention is that even in just my 3 years in HR, there used to, in my first year, and even when I was shadowing Kelly Zerfas, there seemed to be a hiring season, and then it would quiet down and you'd be pretty much good to go for a while. The hiring has just not stopped. We have people coming in and out, not so much certified like classroom teachers, but we have positions where people are coming in and out at a more fluid rate. So we are hiring full year all the time. I sent you an update today. We are always hiring. So if you look at our posting page, you'll see we have dual language positions right now, the early learning center, a couple special education positions, of course, the temporary positions, and then some of our recruiting efforts, like our interns and student teachers.
Question, Brock, on the employee sheet today, there was a temporary custodian hired. Where is that custodian going to be working?
That's correct. And Mardell, I'm excited to share that that is a former student of mine at Claremont, from Claremont Elementary School.
Oh, kidding.
Absolutely. So we knew when we were starting the reopening school plan that we would need some temporary staff. So we've had those positions posted. And since we delayed the hybrid start, we delayed some of those hiring efforts because we were in a good place. And now, once again, we're preparing ourselves to have enough coverage options. So that staff member will go to different.
He might be moved around then.
He might be moved around, but what's nice is we also know that we're going to have some openings in that group. And then this is a great opportunity to get people in from our district, train them, support them while they support us, and again, have a nice recruitment hiring cycle.
Yeah, good idea.
Ross, can I ask you, now I don't know if this is something we have to approve every time or go through every time, but since the incentive thing was so successful these past 2 times, I consider pretty successful, is that something we'll consider continuing with, because it kind of gives you like a leg up? I kind of think it's a great thing to continue.
Yes, Dr. Fessler, do you want to speak to how that typically comes about?
Can you repeat the question, Patty?
The incentive that we've offered people to retire or do
retirement.
Yes. Are we going to think of keeping that as like a consistent thing, or is that just something we'll use it when we need it?
Yeah, it's typically, I mean, we've used it as part of resource allocation in the past to try to encourage retirements. So we've not looked at the numbers this year. So typically Ross would generate a human resources report to see who would be eligible. And then we would look and see if it would be, advantage to both groups. But we have kept it out of the contract negotiation deliberately so we can revisit it whenever possible. So we'll be looking at that potentially this year to see if there would be an incentive for both groups to provide something.
And it is something that we've done for a long time. It's not something new. We've done this many, many times in the way past.
I've only had the one experience, but it was really nice to see that outside of the negotiated agreement, but alongside it. So we have that shared interest, but even looking at this year, boy, can the conditions change. So it did provide, but also looking out, saying, here's an incentive for this year, but here's what it would look like the year after. That was also a win-win for staff and for us. So I think we have aligned interests in working together to try to make those things happen. When
this year is a little more unique just because of COVID, and we're really uncertain what the whole hiring process will look like, Patty.
Yeah.
But we'll take a look at that and see who's eligible and hash out those numbers and then talk to the board. And we can talk about that in a closed session because that is a negotiation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, Patty.
And that's all for me. Thank you.
And those are all the reports that we have. I think you're muted. I think you're muted, Janice.
Sorry, I thought you were listening to every word. Okay, I was asking if there are any more questions, but seeing none, I'd like somebody to make a motion to go into closed session for the purposes listed.
I can
Go
do
ahead.
it, Courtney. I move that we go into closed session for the discussion of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. Collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. 5 Illinois statutes 120 2C12.
Mardell will second.
All right, Mardell seconds. Roll call, please.
Okay, Lang,
Aye.
Nancia,
Aye.
Bailey, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye.
Darlevich,
Aye.
and the motion passes.
All right, we'll meet you over in the closed session. I'm going to take a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene in 5. Okay.
Okay.
See you there.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, everybody who listened. Compared to me,
Yeah, she's just a baby.
yeah. Okay, so we're all back. So we have one more item, which is what I forgot to discuss earlier, which is whether or not you want to go to have our meetings in person in the admin building. The big caveat is that the meeting size is restricted to 10. So that really doesn't give us much wiggle room. We can't even meet with the senior leadership team.
How do we balance the messaging that meeting sizes are limited to 10, but they can have 50 kids in the classroom?
That's because that's what the governor approved.
Yeah.
He's allowed that, but it's not allowed for other meetings.
You're saying this, the board of 7 and the superintendent at 8 and then only 2 more people?
And one would even be like Justin or something like that has to run the videos.
Justin and then Cindy. Justin, Cindy, Art, and 7 board members, or maybe 6 because Patty would rather not meet in person.
Not till I get my shots. Give me my shots, I'll be there.
Right.
I mean, I think, Robert, part of the argument for the distinction would be what's been the distinction all along, which is what's the essential function, right?
Yeah,
And can the essential function be done at home or not? And when we have Dr. Fauci saying, open the schools, close the bars, the essential function of education has in-person value that can't be replaced. But I think for our board meetings, the same rationale doesn't apply.
See, but I would take that's an argument. Say you're the board members, you're directing the district, you're leading the district and making the education decisions and stuff like that. So that would be my counter argument, saying we are impacting that.
Yeah.
And we've got new members who hardly have gotten to even know.
I mean, that's the argument that my work made and said that even though as a lawyer I can easily work from home, they called our business essential because we test stuff for COVID, so I had to go in. So I think there's arguments on both sides.
Can I ask Justin, can I ask you a question now? One thing that I had kind of thought about when we're talking about this, we have the 7 board members, just we're counting Patty because we love Patty. We have Art, Cindy, and then someone running the video equipment. We'll just use Justin's example for that. So that'd be the 10 of us. Then the senior leadership team, can they be in their offices and join us via Zoom? Is that technology available?
We would have to look into that. I think the issue becomes if we try to introduce more than one computer into the boardroom. If we can get one Zoom feed on one monitor, then that would eliminate any issues with audio. But we would just have to look into that possibility.
Yeah, but they did that in NSSEO, and it was a real abject failure because you're going to have a microphone so that the rest of the board members can be heard. But then it interferes with the audio that's being picked up by the computer itself.
So, because I mean, I know when Mardell and I were at a facilities meeting, we couldn't be near each other because our computers would pick each other up and was causing disruption or whatever.
Right, you can't. So even if you have one, you still need to have audio to pick up the rest of the people in the room. And then the person who's sitting at the computer, it's going to be interfered with. And then you still have to have the audio feed for people to watch. So logistically, it's not very pretty. It really doesn't work very well.
Well, should we compromise and say we'll do the committee of the whole in January on Zoom, and starting in February we'll go back to the boardroom?
But we can't if the limit is 10. That has to be lifted by the governor in order for us to hold enough people in the room to conduct our business, because we're limited to 10.
Is this a new rule of his? Because we had more than 10 in the room when we had our one meeting.
Yes, it happened in between when the rates started to go up. He closed the bars again.
Mardell, remember in November it started to spike again and they reinstituted it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, if we're limited to 10, then we can't really do much about it.
Well, I still see. I mean, I want to ask Justin to see if it's possible to see if that, what he was talking about, if that would work.
Well, why don't we do that then?
Just to see if that would work.
So again, let me talk to Ben about it, because truthfully, I don't know sitting here right now. We do have the capability to stream the meeting via camera and plug into our audio system that records in the back of the room. So that would get us the live stream capability. In terms of getting other SLT members on a feed that we could not only have the board hear, but also plug into the audio feed so the audience could hear. That's just something we have not explored yet, but we can look into it.
All right. I
So
mean,
what I'm wondering is if a majority of the board supports revisiting the in-person once the 10-person limit is lifted.
that's what
Yes.
I'd rather do.
So how many would support revisiting it once the 10-person is lifted?
Me.
Me.
Just 3 of us, 4 of us, Patty?
What are we voting?
I gotta wait for my shots. I'm not deviating.
You're not going to do it either way, so you're abstaining pretty much.
On my opinion, I'm good on going back, now. So, whatever whatever everyone's comfortable with, I'll fall in line on this one to get business done. That's the most important thing to me.
We can't make it at the next meeting because we're still investigating, then we don't make it until February.
Well, the next question I would have is, are other districts still, even though, what did other districts do when they were like now, that when they had in-person learning?
Yeah.
We had 25 and.
I think D25 was in person for their
But
board
yeah, but
meetings.
They were the whole time.
Yeah.
Was their board remote the whole
also.
time?
That I don't know.
Going back.
See, I mean, I think that's an interesting question to have, because we could find out how they handled it as well too.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
I mean,
Justin,
and there's one thing that is what has me saying that I don't mind us being remote, because we won't be wearing masks. We can hear each other talk much better, and listen. We can hear each other better. So that's one part that I do truly approve of, relate to us staying remote. But I'm still saying we're putting our staff and we're requiring our staff to be in, unless they get accommodation, to be in teaching around, if we're if we go as board members into a board meeting, I trust that if you have a common cold or you've been exposed to someone with COVID, that you would take the proper procedures and isolate and not participate in person. Our teachers are being put into classrooms that they're relying on parents, that want their kids back in school and may do whatever there is to, get past that and put our teachers at risk, and our staffs at risk, and anybody in the buildings at risk, and other kids at risk, because they want their kids in school that badly. So that's why I'm really kind of pushing for us to go back in person, because of that, to say, hey, we know we're putting you at risk, but we're also doing the same thing because we believe in you and we want to support you any way we can. That's why I'm kind of pushing for the back.
But you know what? What goes, back to what Courtney said, we can do our job this way. I think it's a better experience to anybody who's listening to see us on Zoom rather than have that one video that's set in the boardroom. And I've got risk factors. Why, I'm all for supporting teachers, but I don't know that I have to put my life on the line if I don't have to.
It's I get it. I'm just going to be honest, and I think the optics are going to be awful if there's a lot of staff that have the same concerns and a lot of staff that do not feel comfortable going back to work and feel that they don't have the choice. And if we say we can't meet for 2-3 hours a month in a boardroom, I think it's just going to
we're restricted on.
Well, right. Obviously, we have those rules, but I'm just saying if the ability is there, I would prefer personally to go back.
Well, yeah, but how is it going to be? It's going to be weird to have, the whole SLT in separate rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we seeing them?
Are they in the building now? I mean, or like when they do the Zooms, a lot of them seem to be in their offices.
They were all in their offices tonight.
Yeah.
They were tonight, but they haven't always been.
Yeah.
Most of the time that lately, I mean, sometimes in the beginning they were at home, but more often lately they've been in the office on a regular basis for the meetings.
So the part where I'm most compelled is I do want to show solidarity with our staff. I believe this is an incredibly challenging time to be a teacher, to be an ESP, to be a custodian. Like, it's very challenging. But I also recognize the bigger picture that we're in a pandemic, and the advice is stay at home if you can, right? So I go into my office because my job requires it. But in my volunteer time, my husband works at a church. Volunteer stuff is shut down because the church is in general in a senior age range, right? And I don't feel like Janice as board president and being in that vulnerable age range, or Mardell as a board member, like, should be compelled to do that. So I guess my feeling is to revisit when the 10-person lifts. But I mean, I really appreciate Randy's point of view, because I think his heart is in the right place. But I think there's actually an even bigger picture of what is best for public health.
Well, I like the idea, but I would like it if we could meet in the same room. I just think that it's so clunky to have some of us here and others are on Zoom and trying to get it all to work. It's just very against sort of this sense of working together that I feel when at least we're all in Zoom and we're in our own little boxes.
Yeah. But I mean, even if, let's say, for example, me, Chris, and Randy went to the ad building for the next meeting and logged into Zoom the way we would, and everyone here logged into Zoom the way we would, I mean, there wouldn't be any difference in the way this meeting was conducted other than me, Randy, and Chris would be.
You're going to have to be sitting way far from each other.
Well, we should.
But
No, but I mean, really
Robert's
far
point
because of
is, but Robert's point is that, again, the aesthetics or the optics, and aesthetics was the word I was looking for earlier, is important. I'm more than comfortable for the next board meeting to be at the ad building wherever, as long as it's in the building and we can run it just how we've been running these meetings since March.
That's actually a super smart idea.
Robert, I agree with you.
That's a super smart idea, that we all go, but maybe take separate spaces.
Like, we don't have to be in the boardroom.
I think the boardroom is best.
But we could
there's
only going to be 10 of us in the room. It's a huge room.
I think the boardroom is best because of that. The space is good.
But we need to be spread out. If we're going to continue doing Zoom, we need to spread out. Remember that interference you and I had that time when we were together in one conference room?
Spread out more than sitting next to each other. We've got plenty of room to use other
tables. I mean, there's the board, there's the room behind where we do our closed session. We get to put a person in there. 2 could be in the boardroom. There's other conference rooms in the building that we could use too.
And then we could be mask free. So to your point about understanding people, like, that wouldn't be an issue, because we could have a separate room. I mean, I think that's a brilliant solution. I don't know who exactly came up with it, but I think it's very smart.
I think Robert got it. I'll give Robert credit. I like that. We can try and see how it works. For those, now with that said, if, like, Patty, you don't want to come in, completely understand. Janice, Mardell, if you don't, if you feel you feel like you don't need to be, you can be home. You can be home, but those that want to be there should be allowed to be there. I think should be there.
I'll come out, but I just don't want to sit next to somebody.
Well, yeah, but if we're in the same boardroom, I think we need to have our masks on.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We'd be in separate rooms and different conference rooms.
Well, that's ridiculous. If we're going to be in separate conference rooms, I'd rather stay home. If we're not going to be in the same room so that we can actually.
No. I don't think that would work. I think like we were saying, we separate and one of us goes here, one of us goes there, one of us goes there, but we're there.
We've got long tables. If one's at one end of the table and somebody's at the other end of the table and nobody's on the sides of the table, you're more than 6 feet away from each other.
But it's against the Department of Public Health regulations or requirements that you wear a mask.
I didn't
say do that. You're going to have to wear a mask.
I don't mind wearing a mask.
As long as you get one that stays over your nose, right, Mardell?
I just won't wear my glasses because that's the problem.
Well, I mean, see now, what is the requirement? Because in my office, we don't need to wear, unless when we're sitting at our desks, we don't need to wear masks.
As long as your door is closed.
No, I don't have I have a cube. And
You're making me more nervous right now, Randy. You're in your office with no masks in a cube.
I'm in my cube, and there's no more than 2 cubes of me.
Yeah, that's still not. When you're indoors, you should be wearing a mask unless you take it off to eat, and then you have to be at least 6 feet. But that's not particularly safe. So you should be wearing a mask.
door at my office and I'm still
Yeah.
required to wear a mask when the door is closed.
All right,
Because when I open the door, the air will circulate.
One at the end of the
Anyway.
month and one
Right.
the second week in the month. So within the next little while, we've got 2 meetings. Which one are we going to go to? And which one are we going to
The
do?
February one, or what did we say?
I see
January 25th.
the January 25th one. I'll come
Oh,
to
yeah.
I'll come into the ad building.
I'll go there on the 25th.
Ditto.
All right, well, let's ask Cindy if she can round up enough conference room space that we can each have our own.
Now, I don't want to go if we're going to be in separate rooms. Then we might as well do Zoom. That's ridiculous. I want to be in the same room. I'll be at the
But
opposite.
we're gonna do Zoom anyway.
That's your choice, Mardell.
No, Mardell, you can stay home then. Yeah,
No,
You'll
I
be in separate.
want to be there with everybody else, but I want to be in the same room.
no, we're not gonna do that, Mardell. We've already determined we're gonna use Zoom from different conference rooms. Because that's the quality of the
Clearly
experience.
the path of least resistance at this point to take a step forward.
Right.
So let's just do that and then lay
Right.
out the pathway to
First,
the next step.
the first about 6 meetings, I was over there in the conference room next to Art. I had the conference room all to myself because I couldn't do the Zoom from my house at that point, but now I know how.
So that's what we'll be doing.
Well, it's up to you.
Well, I'll go
You
there
can do it from your house if you want.
if you want.
All
me.
right, Mardell, you either have to decide you're gonna do it that way or not, but I'm gonna contact Cindy and ask her to round up. And Patty, you're gonna stay at home, right?
Yes, I am.
Right, so we need 6 spaces where we
Janice,
can.
Janice, do you
Zoom.
feel,
Art,
Janice, do you feel comfortable coming in and doing what we're proposing?
Art will be
I
in his
think it's-
office and
I think it's,
in hers.
Mardell, wait, I'm speaking. Hold on a minute. Hold your thought. I will come in. I will probably wear a mask unless that room has been cleaned and the airflow has had, like 6 hours. So I'm gonna wear a mask, but I will come in.
Okay, I don't want to feel like you're being pressured into it either, though.
I feel the same way you do, Randy. I mean, at the base of it, I understand that it helps teachers feel better that we're there and we feel that it's safe enough for us to be there. But I am going to wear a mask and I'm fine with that. I don't believe that they're at great risk of getting sick. It's very clear from all the data that the mitigation strategies work. So, being in the building, I was just concerned about how the heck you would make the technology work logistically, but this solves that problem.
You wanted to add on something? What were you going to say?
I don't know, forget it.
No, you said you wanted your conference room.
I said I will be in my conference room.
Well,
Where I
you'll
use
have to make sure Cindy knows which one that is.
right next to Art's office.
The one on the other side.
Cindy and Art are next to each other and the conference room is parallel to them.
On the other side of the aisle, right. Okay, that's fine. All right, are we done?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Does anybody want to continue?
Robert, mhm.
Well,
Well, I got 5 more topics I can bring up if you want.
and we're gonna
You've caused
adjourn the
trouble
meeting.
already.
This is not a financial and maintenance meeting, Randy.
Who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
Me.
All right, roll call, Ms. Teacher.
Oh yeah, that's right. Robert,
Aye.
Patty, Randy,
Aye.
Mardell. Did she say aye?
I
Yes.
did I?
Okay. You were very soft-spoken there. Janice,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye,
aye, aye, Captain, and Courtney.
Aye, aye, aye.